Some structures did not fade away slowly over centuries. They completely vanished from the earth. No photos exist. Nobody alive today has ever seen them standing. Today we count down 3 wonders of the ancient world that disappeared so completely, most people cannot even picture what they really looked like. One was brought down by fire and stone. One was murdered by a single earthquake. And the last one might not have even existed where everyone thinks it did. Number 1. The Lighthouse of Alexandria. It was built around 280 BC on a small island called Pharos, just outside the harbor of Alexandria in Egypt. The project was ordered by the ruler Ptolemy II and designed by an architect named Sostratus of Cnidus. It stood about 100 meters tall, built from huge blocks of pale stone. That made it one of the tallest man-made structures on the entire planet for well over 1,000 years. Only the Great Pyramid stood taller, and that pyramid had already been ancient history by the time this lighthouse was even built. The design had 3 stacked sections: a square base, a middle section shaped like an octagon, and a round top section holding the actual light. Workers hauled the stone blocks up a long spiral ramp built around the tower, letting carts and animals walk straight to the top instead of using rope. At night, a huge fire burned at the very peak, fed constantly by keepers who lived and worked inside the tower. During the day, the smoke alone could be seen from far away. Ancient writers claimed a giant polished metal mirror sat behind the flame, catching the light and throwing it out across the water so ships could spot it from dozens of miles out at sea. Legend even grew around that mirror, claiming it could focus sunlight into a beam hot enough to burn enemy ships. Historians today think that part is almost certainly a myth, but the basic reflecting mechanism for guiding ships was very real. The lighthouse worked exactly as intended for an incredibly long time. It survived wars, pirates, and centuries of changing empires, from Roman to Byzantine to Arab rule. Through all of that chaos, the light at the top kept burning. In the end, it was not an army that finally destroyed it. It was the ground itself. A major earthquake in the year 956 cracked the structure badly. 2 more huge earthquakes in 1303 and 1323 finished the job, cracking the tower apart until it slowly crumbled into the sea. A famous traveler named Ibn Battuta visited the site twice in his life. The first time he saw a damaged but still recognizable tower. The second time, decades later, he found it had collapsed so completely he could not even climb inside the ruins. Here's the twist. Centuries after the final collapse, a sultan named Qaitbay built a stone fort directly on that exact same spot to defend the harbor. He used the fallen blocks of the lighthouse itself as building material for the new fort. That fort is still standing in Alexandria today, which means pieces of one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world are technically still in use as a building right now. In 1994, divers finally located the sunken remains scattered across the harbor floor, including massive blocks, statues, and sphinxes that had toppled straight into the water. Up next is a giant that did not need 1,600 years to fall. It barely lasted 50. Number 2. The Colossus of Rhodes. This was a giant bronze statue of the sun god Helios, built around 280 BC on the Greek island of Rhodes. The story behind it starts with a war. A powerful ruler named Demetrius laid siege to the city for an entire year, using massive siege engines, including one giant assault tower called the Helepolis. The city held on, and Demetrius eventually retreated, leaving his siege equipment behind. The people of Rhodes melted down that leftover bronze and iron, and used the metal to fund and build a giant statue celebrating their survival. A local sculptor named Charis of Lindos took on the project. It took him roughly 12 years to complete it. The statue stood over 30 meters tall, which is roughly the height of the Statue of Liberty today, not counting its pedestal. It was built in stages, using an iron and stone frame covered with hammered bronze plates, workers piling earth mounds around it to reach each new level, then clearing the dirt once it was finished. Most people today picture the statue standing with its legs spread wide apart, directly over the harbor entrance, letting full-size ships sail right underneath it. That image is not true. It is a myth invented by artists more than 1,000 years later. No ancient engineer could have built a hollow standing statue in that pose with the technology of that time. And ancient writers who actually saw it describe it standing on a solid base, not straddling the harbor. The real Colossus stood for only 54 years. Around 226 BC, a massive earthquake struck Rhodes and the statue snapped at its weakest point, which was the knees, sending the entire upper body crashing down to the ground. An Egyptian king named Ptolemy III offered to personally pay for the entire statue to be rebuilt. The people of Rhodes turned the offer down. An oracle had apparently warned them that rebuilding it would offend the god Helios himself, so they left the wreckage exactly where it fell. Here's the twist. That wreckage did not get cleared away or forgotten. For the next 800 years, the broken bronze pieces just lay there on the ground, and people traveled from all over the ancient world specifically to see them. A Roman writer named Pliny the Elder wrote that even lying broken, the statue was still an incredible sight, and that most people could not wrap their arms around one of its fingers. The fallen ruins were a tourist attraction for far longer than the statue ever stood upright. The wreckage was not destroyed until the year 654, when Arab forces conquered the island and reportedly sold the bronze scrap to a merchant who needed 900 camels just to haul all the metal away to be melted down for good. The final wonder on this list might be the most famous of them all, and there's a real chance it never even stood in the city everyone thinks it did. Number 3. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Ancient writers describe tiered gardens rising up like a green mountain in the middle of a flat desert city. Layer after layer of stone terraces were said to be packed with soil, deep enough to grow full-size trees with roots and everything, held up high above the ground on stone columns and arches. Greek writers, including Diodorus Siculus and Strabo, described an enormous chain pump system built to lift water up from the Euphrates River to the very top so it could flow back down, naturally watering every terrace along the way. Waterproofing it without modern materials was done with layers of reed-lead sheets and thick bitumen, so water would not soak straight through the stone. According to legend, the whole thing was built by King Nebuchadnezzar II for his wife Amadis, who came from the green mountainous region of Media. She was said to be homesick living in flat, dusty Babylon and missing the hills of her homeland, so the king built her an artificial mountain covered in plants to make her feel at home. It is an incredible story. Here's the problem. Every single Greek and Roman writer who described the gardens in detail was writing generations after the gardens supposedly existed. Not one of them ever saw it themselves. They were copying earlier accounts written by other people who also never saw it themselves. Now compare that to how obsessively the real Nebuchadnezzar documented his actual building projects. Babylonian records list his city walls, his temples, his palace, and his processional street in exact detail, carved directly into stone and clay tablets that survive to this day. Not one single Babylonian record from his own time period mentions a hanging garden anywhere. Not one. The Greek historian Herodotus personally visited Babylon and wrote a long, detailed description of the city, including its massive walls and its temples. He never once mentions a garden of any kind, which is an enormous silence for something supposedly counted among the greatest wonders in the entire world. So where did this story actually come from? A growing number of modern historians, led by researcher Stephanie Daly, now believe the real gardens were never in Babylon at all. They think the real watered terrace gardens were built about 300 miles north in the city of Nineveh by a different king named Sennacherib, who left detailed written records describing a garden watered by an aqueduct system he personally engineered. Over the following centuries, as empires rose and fell and old records got mixed together, the memory of a real garden in Nineveh may have simply drifted onto the more famous name of Babylon until the two got tangled into one legendary story. That means one of the most famous wonders in human history might be a case of mistaken identity that has lasted well over 2,000 years. Nobody has ever found solid physical proof that hanging gardens stood in Babylon. Nobody may ever be able to prove exactly where the real gardens stood, or whether the version everyone pictures ever truly existed at all. 3 wonders. One stood for over 1,600 years before earthquakes finally drowned it in rubble. One snapped at the knees after barely 50 years, and then lay as ruins even longer than it ever stood whole. And one that might not have existed in the place we all picture at all. Which one surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below.